The idea began with a simple, yet unsettling question. What happens inside a coffin after burial? For years, people had speculated, but no one had dared to find the answer. Dr. Laura Evans and her team of researchers sought to change that. Their goal was not to shock or sensationalize, but to uncover scientific truths that could benefit medicine, archaeology, and environmental studies. The concept was bold and controversial, placing a small hidden camera inside a coffin to record what happens after burial. Getting approval for the project was no easy feat. Many deemed it disrespectful, while others dismissed it as unnecessary. Yet, after months of debate, the team was finally given the green light, thanks to the support of Mr. Thomas Rear Thomas, a retired botanist diagnosed with a terminal illness. At 78, he had come to terms with his fate and wished for his passing to contribute to something meaningful. "If this helps science, I'm all for it," he had said with a smile, his calm acceptance inspiring the team. On the day of the burial, Thomas's family gathered to say their goodbyes. It was a quiet, emotional ceremony filled with tears and heartfelt tributes. Dr. Evans and her team stood at a respectful distance, watching as the casket was lowered into the ground. Inside the coffin, the tiny high-definition camera was already active, its lens poised to capture what no one had ever seen before. Back at the lab, the live feed displayed the still interior of the coffin. The experiment had officially begun. Hours passed, and the camera's feed showed nothing unusual. The soft fabric lining remained untouched, the coffin interior undisturbed. The scientists observed in silence, taking meticulous notes. As expected, the early stages of the experiment appeared uneventful, yet there was a palpable tension in the room. Each of them knew that this had never been done before. Anything could happen. Dr. Evans sat at her desk, carefully reviewing the live footage. Patience was key, she reminded herself and the team. The experiment was in its infancy, and significant observations would take time. The faint hum of the equipment and the steady green glow of the camera filled the room with an eerie silence. They were scientists, accustomed to data and logic, yet an unspoken sense of anticipation lingered in the air. About 6 hours in, one of the technicians, Michael, furrowed his brows as he stared at the monitor. "Did anyone else see that?" he asked softly, breaking the silence. The team immediately focused on the screen. There was nothing, just the same unmoving image of the coffin's interior. "Maybe it was a glitch," someone suggested. But Michael rewound the footage, analyzing it frame by frame. They watched closely. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, a faint flicker near the edge of the screen. It could have been a trick of the light, a brief disruption in the signal. Yet, it did not resemble normal interference. Dr. Evans leaned in, her expression serious. "Note it down," she instructed. "Let's keep watching." The room grew quieter still. Whatever had caused the flicker left the team uneasy. Was it just a technical hiccup, or was it the beginning of something none of them had anticipated? No one voiced their thoughts, but the question lingered in their minds. By the 12th hour, the lab was thick with a mix of curiosity and unease. The earlier flicker had been dismissed as a possible glitch, yet it had left a mark on their minds. Now every second felt heavier, every moment scrutinized with increasing focus. The camera's feed remained clear, displaying the motionless coffin interior, yet no one could shake the feeling that something was just beneath the surface, something they couldn't explain. Then suddenly a faint sound broke the silence. It was soft, almost inaudible at first, like a gentle tap against wood. The team froze, exchanging uneasy glances. The sound came again, this time louder, more deliberate. "What was that?" Michael whispered, his voice barely above a breath. No one answered. Leaning in closer, they strained to hear. The tapping continued, rhythmic, steady. It wasn't random, nor did it resemble the natural settling of wood or soil. Dr. Evans raised her hand, signaling for silence. Her sharp eyes remained fixed on the screen. The sound paused momentarily, then resumed, almost as if following a pattern. "Could it be interference from the environment?" another scientist suggested, though their voice wavered with doubt. Dr. Evans didn't respond immediately. Instead, she gestured for the audio to be amplified. The tapping grew clearer, and with it, a subtle vibration trembled through the feed, as if the camera itself had picked up the movement. The sound ceased as suddenly as it had begun, leaving the lab in an uneasy hush. The team remained motionless, waiting, listening. Finally, Dr. Evans broke the tension. "Mark this in the logs," she said, though her voice betrayed a trace of unease. "Keep monitoring." The room settled back into an uneasy quiet, but the atmosphere had shifted. What had started as a calculated, methodical experiment now felt charged with the unknown. Each member of the team sat on edge, uncertain of what they might see or hear next. By the 18th hour, the tension had grown unbearable. The earlier tapping had unsettled the team, yet the feed had returned to eerie stillness. The scientists worked quietly, reviewing the footage over and over, searching for an explanation. Yet the more they analyzed, the less certain they became. The taps hadn't been random. They had a rhythm, an intentionality, and that made no sense. Dr. Evans forced herself to focus, her notes filling with observations and theories. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were witnessing something beyond the scope of their experiment. The room remained silent, each scientist lost in thought, until another sound broke through. This time, it was different. Faint, like fabric brushing against wood. Soft but steady, growing louder. The burial shroud on the screen shifted, its edge lifting and settling back as if disturbed by an unseen force. The team watched, breathless. "That's movement," Michael murmured, his voice shaky. "There's no airflow down there," another scientist added, his voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing should be moving." Dr. Evans nodded slowly, her eyes locked on the screen. "Replay it," she instructed. The footage was rewound and played in slow motion. The shroud's movement was subtle but undeniable. No air currents, no mechanical interference. Just an inexplicable disturbance. The sound of brushing fabric stopped, and the shroud stilled once more. The scientists exchanged uneasy glances. The flicker, the tapping, the movement. It was forming a pattern. One they didn't understand. Though no one spoke, the same thought lingered in their minds. This was only the beginning.